everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Experience Maker Live show in 2022. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Dan Gingiss, the Experience Maker, and I am so excited to be back with you in a brand new year with brand new guests. We continue to have just an amazing lineup of guests for this show. I am so humbled and honored to have all these incredible people that we can all learn from. And we'll get to today's guest in 1 second. I just want to remind you that I do have a great new book out, The Experience Maker. I'm so excited. It was named one of the top business books of 2021 by Forbes, LinkedIn, and Book Authority, all happening in December. So that was super exciting. Get your copy of The Experience Maker, How to Create Remarkable Experiences That Your Customers Can't Wait to Share today. Share it with the team. If you actually want to buy multiple copies, let me know. I can hook you up with some great bulk discounts. All right, today we have an exciting guest who is a self-described CX nerd. So I am super excited to nerd out today with an agency co-founder of M2M Experience Consulting, Jesse Otta. How are you, Jesse?
Hey, Dan, I'm doing great. And I guess if this is the first show of 2022, we have to start it off real strong.
We definitely do. It's going to be, I don't know about you, but I have this confidence. I'm not entirely sure where it's coming from, but confidence and optimism that 2022 is going to be an amazing year. How are you feeling about it?
I'm really looking forward to this year, and I also share your optimism. I think that we're due for having a really spectacular year, and you can tell that people are just, I think they're ready and they're hungry for that. So I definitely share in that this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's been getting tiring, and it's sort of every time we feel like we're out of this pandemic thing, we get thrown back in it. But it definitely seems like, I mean, one of the things I feel, and open to your thoughts here, but which is really a customer experience issue, is preparedness. And I feel like companies, individuals, entrepreneurs like us, we're just more prepared this time, so it doesn't feel quite as bad as before because we recognize it. It might be frustrating, but we kind of know what to do at this point. So we're more prepared. Are you feeling similarly?
I would agree with that somewhat, and I think it may be a little bit different on this side. And just to be clear, I'm coming from Canada here, so on this side of the border, I think the situation is slightly different as well. So we've had a lot more restriction and regulation. Our healthcare system really can't take really the extra. We don't have the extra capacity that you may have in the US. So there's been significant restriction. And what I'm seeing too with businesses, almost like there's two camps where there are a lot of folks who have been prepared and they've taken the opportunity to look at, okay, how can I do things differently, and what else can I do? And then there's others that have been, just treading water and really just trying to really survive. And when we go into these different time periods where there's increased restriction and a lot of uncertainty, it's almost like, they're not even looking at, okay, how can I address this? How can I stay alive without really just taking a step back and saying, okay, maybe there's a great opportunity here for me to do things a little bit differently. So I'm seeing a bit more of that here in Canada, and it's almost like there's these two camps. And now with right now we're going into we are in a current another lockdown period that's just started this week. I feel like there's a lot of fear and a lot of folks that are, they kind of had this idea that, okay, we're going to be coming out of this. There was this optimism going into the fall that, we're doing really well. And they didn't really plan enough. They just survived. And now there's real trouble. So I think that what I'm seeing is that there's almost two camps here.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I forgot to mention in the intro that you're from Canada. I'm a big Canada fan. And what we should have done, because I always love this when I go to baseball games, and certainly used to be, I'm a Cubs fan. So it used to be when the Expos were in town, but now it'd have to be the Blue Jays. But when they sing both national anthems, I think we should have done that before our program today, sung both national anthems. But we didn't. Maybe next time. But yeah, thank you for that insight on Canada. I think it is a little bit different here, and not necessarily better, by the way. I think that, we don't have the restrictions here, but that's also why our hospitals are so filled, and we've got, other problems that we're dealing with. And so it's absolutely a challenge. I believe that one of the positive outcomes of the pandemic has been an increased focus on customer experience. It's a shame we needed a pandemic to get there, but I definitely think that we figured out, or companies have figured out, that this is not something you can walk away from. I'm interested that you refer to yourself as a CX nerd. Will you tell me a little bit about your nerdery around customer experience?
Well, I guess, anybody who's really passionate in any kind of area could be considered a bit of a nerd. I'm maybe a nerd in two areas. One, you see behind me, there's a poster from boxing. I'm a big boxing nerd, and also a customer experience nerd, just the two things that I'm really passionate about. And I guess it goes back to really my entry into the workforce when I'm a 14-year-old kid. I skinny. I look like I'm made of popsicle sticks. I have a few extra pounds on me now, but I get a job at a car wash. And this is where I learned, I remember getting this job, and I was focused on, I wanted to get a new moped. And so it's just hilarious. And, I'm saving to buy this moped, and I realize, the more I put into the experience, the more tips that we get, and the quicker that I can get to this moped. I think those were the first kind of pulls to really focus on that customer experience. And I've really, really focused on that throughout my career. And as my career had developed to a point where I remember I was in, and it was very, very well intentioned, but I spent the majority of my career in financial services. And I was in a development meeting with one of the executives, and he had said to me, he was trying to tell me, you need to broaden some of your experiences and work in different areas of the business. And he said to me, you don't want to be known as the customer experience guy. And kind of a light bulb went off in that moment, where I know that was very well-intentioned advice, but I said, why not? And so it's something that I've continued to focus on, and that kind of led into, I had this really great opportunity to co-author a book as well. And The Experience Maker, by the way, is #1 on my list for 2022. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. But yeah, so I co-authored a book, and we were really, really fortunate. We were able to find a publisher that loved our concept. And from there, just that the nerddom just began to continue to blossom. So I guess that's where that kind of comes from. It's a long journey.
I love it. So tell me more about your book.
So really, it was actually my my boss at the time and I, and we had met. So when you look at our journeys, from the years, from the time, say, for example, when I was working as a kid at a car wash, all the way up into the point where she had hired me. I had an interesting background, like I had mentioned, working at the car wash, and it was almost like, if you remember, scenes of the beginning of Goodfellas, when Henry is working and he's meeting the world, and that's, in a sense, that's how it was, without the mafia component. But just like a bright-eyed young 14-year-old being introduced to the world, and I'm having all these experiences, and I'm really learning about what great customer experience is. At the same time, my co-author is at that time, and just to give a bit of context, in Canada, financial services really dominated by 5 large banks, 2 of which have a decent footprint in the United States as well, with Royal Bank and TD Bank. And so she was a vice president with one of the large banks. And so we had these really, really different backgrounds. She's this kind of, you could say, this Bay Street banker, and Bay Street would be like almost like our equivalent to Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And this kid working at a car wash. And when we finally end up working together, we discovered that even though we had these really, really different backgrounds, we've come to a lot of the same conclusions in terms of the customer experience and what's truly important. It's the humans. And so based on that, we had compiled, we said, what are the really most critical aspects of customer experience? And then we narrowed down to individuals that taught us something very important about those aspects and introduced each other to them. And that's what we based our book on, essentially the advice from these folks. So it'd be a read really for anyone from frontline employee to someone that's in a leadership position that could take some of these essentially simple truths and then be able to implement that into their vision and into what their real focus is.
I love it. You mentioned at the beginning of that you had so many customer experience stories. Two questions. One is, what do you think the role of storytelling is in customer experience? And two, I would love it if you would share one of your favorite customer experience stories. I made that one the second one, so you can think a little bit about it as you're answering the first one.
No, I know I have a definite idea of the story, and I think storytelling is so critical, so important. And working with organizations and working with frontline staff, really, I think the storytelling is so critical from a training perspective, because a lot of folks think, I'm not creative. And you think of, so I'll tell you, for example, when we were looking at being memorable and focusing on that in the book, I thought of someone immediately. And so going back to the car wash as an example. So I worked at a car wash, and there was a period of time where I'd managed the car wash. And so the car wash is a convenience-based business. Industry experts will tell you that you're really looking at 0.5% of your drive-by traffic per day is what your volume should look like. Now, for the car wash model that we had about half of what we should have had in terms of drive-by traffic to make our business successful. And the volume really showed that. We really buckled down and focused. And after a year, we were doubling the industry average. And I think it really was because we had some people, like there was this man named Ronnie, and he was unbelievable. And he taught me the value of being memorable in your delivery. And so he was incredibly outgoing, and he would go, and if he noticed that there was somebody who'd come in as a customer that had an Italian flag sticker, on a bumper sticker on their car, he'd start to sing to them in Italian. And if he found out that it was a customer's birthday, he created this whole birthday production, and he'd get other people in on it. And I thought about, this guy really understands, when you look at the convenience-based business, people are really looking at, you're driving by, you see, oh, there's a car wash, and what are my expectations? I want a clean car. I want, good value for the price, and I want to get out of there as quickly as possible. And what they ended up with was not just that fulfillment of those things that they were expecting, but it was the feeling, that real feeling that was attached to that experience, that, wow, this person made me feel special. My day is so much better. And they remember this, and this is something, the experience that they're going to talk about and share for that organic growth. And they're going to want to come back and return. And so we started to see that business increase. And so when we wrote the chapter on being memorable, I said, I need to introduce my co-author Draj to Ronnie because he's a special person. And so he had also worked at a farmer's market. And keep in mind, Ronnie was at this time in his 70s, working at this farmer's market. And I said, I'm going to introduce you to him, but I'm not going to tell you who he is. You'll know when you find him. And of course, she finds this person that's, has this whole production, and there's a crowd around his booth where everybody's selling the same kind of stuff, but his booth has the crowd. And, she knows that she'd found Ronnie. But then I think about, there's two things that I'll never do. One, you'll never catch me singing. The other is dancing. I can't be Ronnie. So what can I do? And you think of these stories, and people think, I can't be Ronnie, or I'm not creative. So coming back to the importance of storytelling, when you share some of these stories, I think that's what really, to me, helps people kind of it gets their creative juices going, but then gives them some of the confidence to say, I could do this. And this is how I could connect with someone genuinely. And I'll contrast the story of Ronnie with the story of a cruise ship. And it was a great Disney cruise. Actually, it's funny because I have a Disney Cruise Line mug right here. And so there's a Disney cruise.
We're already talking about your experience. It's already shareable. We don't even know what it is yet.
So here it is. So there's a family on a Disney cruise ship. And you have mom and dad, and you have daughter and son. And so it's their last night on the cruise. You have to think, so Disney cruise is something that if you look at cruise lines, they're probably on the more expensive end. People are spending a lot of money to go on this vacation with their family. And so the one thing that they want when they leave is memories together, of course. And they go to all these extreme lengths. They have a water slide that wraps around the entire deck and all kinds of really great amenities. If you're staying on a cabin that's inside that doesn't have a view of the ocean, they have screens that make it look like there's a live cast of what's happening outside, and they animate characters. So they do all of these things to make sure that people have these great memories. So now the family's on the last night of their cruise, and they're sitting at the dinner table, and the little boy in the family is acting up because he knows this is the end of his trip. So he's being a real pain, and I'm not going to say that his name is Jesse, but I'm not going to say that it's not Jesse. So he's a real pain. And as the dinner goes on, it comes time for dessert, and the server comes to take an order and asks the family, what they'd like. And everybody gives their order, and it comes down to the little boy, and the server asks what the little boy would like. And he looks up defiantly and says, "Nothing." Server says, "Okay, I'll be right back in a moment." Comes back with the desserts, places them in front of the family. And as he's about to leave, he stops, turns around, and says, "No, you know what? I made a big mistake." He looks at the little boy and says, "I forgot yours." The little boy is really, really confused. Looks at the server, says, "No, I asked for nothing." The server says, No. Just give me one moment. I will be right back." A few moments later, the server comes back with a large white plate and places it in front of the boy. In front of the boy on that plate, in chocolate sauce, the server wrote, "Nothing." So what did that family end up with at the end of their cruise? The memory that they were looking for, they had talked about. It cost the company nothing. It was just the thoughtful intent. And someone like me who doesn't sing, who doesn't dance, I'd be very happy to do something like that where I could connect. So I think that storytelling and really being able to communicate some of those examples and share some of that is so important in terms of training and frontline development as well.
Great stories. Thank you for sharing them. Before I get to my commentary, Mr. Straub, Chris, thank you for watching. As always, he says we're looking sharp absolutely today to kick off 2022. So thank you, Chris. Back to the car wash for a second. I thought it was really interesting because you're talking about the expectations of customers, and all of those expectations were very practical. I want it to be reasonably priced. I want there to be good quality. I want to get in and out. I would argue that there is no expectation of an experience. That's not what we think of when we go to get a car wash. So to me, that is the ultimate opportunity. When a person isn't expecting an experience and you can give them one, then you're creating something that people are going to talk about. I always suggest to companies to look for the possibility of an experience where one doesn't exist today. And the examples I often give are simple things like sending an invoice or sending a contract. These are boring parts of business, but they don't have to be. There is no experience attached to them, but that's just because nobody's built an experience around them. And so I love the idea that, hey, people don't expect an experience at a car wash, but then when they get one, now it's really going to be memorable. The cruise example, just awesome, very creative, very, what I love about that is that's not a scalable platform. That's not something that they, probably that anybody had to tell that server to do. They just sort of seized the moment and created something which I think is outstanding. And you're totally right, is also memorable. So Jesse, tell me a little bit about, we maybe should have started here, but tell me a little bit about what you do as an experienced consultant, and kind of what are some of the trends that you're seeing or you're watching in 2022 in terms of experience?
So there's a couple of things. So in terms of my support to businesses and helping them drive extra revenue is really, it kind of goes back to working in the financial services. And at the time when I co-authored the book, I'd been working in a credit union that was Canada's second largest. It is Canada's second largest credit union. And so we had the scale to be able to have really great support in terms of creating a voice of customer, voice of member program, where we had some well-known external partners that were fantastic and really helped us take a really already great experience to another level and help with our coaching and development and segment our member base to really zero in on enhancing that relationship health and loyalty and organic growth as well. The thing that I noticed is that with the credit union industry across the country, there were a lot of smaller players that were struggling and really didn't have the scale to be able to have that same level of support. And this is where the opportunity really lied, is to be able to build a platform. Now, the other problem or the other challenge that these organizations had was around some of the data privacy and data handling laws in Canada, specifically in the area of Canada where I'm operating. And so it'd be really challenging. They couldn't, they can't just go to SurveyMonkey because the data may be residing in the United States, and they had to be very, very careful with third parties. So being able to build a platform that was accessible for these companies, but also to ensure that the data, that their customers' data was handled securely and within the parameters that they had to be handled in terms of our privacy and data handling laws. So being able to build a platform to create scale and make the same level of support accessible for the smaller players or the mid-sized small players that are in the industry, and really helping them on their evolution, their development of customer experience. And really, I look at, so I know it's a little bit cliche talking about Apple, and Steve Jobs had said that Apple, and the thing that really made them successful was that they knew that no matter what they did, no matter what product that they were working on or service that they were going to introduce, they had to make sure that they were always operating at this intersection, this really important intersection between technology and liberal arts. And that was their sandbox. So they could do anything, but as long as they were playing in that sandbox, they were going to be successful. And thinking, so what does my sandbox look like? And to me, it's that intersection between data analytics and the human experience. Because data analytics is really this thing that I think a lot of people, they really, really, to them, it's intimidating or not well understood. And then people that focus solely on the data analytics sometimes forget the human aspects as well. So I think the real power is really focusing on, and the real magic is that intersection between data analytics and the human experience. So creating voice of customer programs and looking at metrics and being able to take those and pair them with internal data that an organization has. So maybe taking a voice customer program, integrating that into a CRM system that they may have, and looking at that for three really distinct purposes. And I kind of touched on this earlier, but one is that relationship health and loyalty. So being able to segment clients and determine really who to zero in on, who's at risk, and where the opportunities for organically growing your business are. And then also that coaching and development piece. So getting that real-time information is so powerful, to take that and integrate that in your frontline coaching. And then lastly, of course, is targeted process improvement. So making sure that we're building, and like you had mentioned, there's these processes that we have sometimes that seem to be really boring, and they are, because we make them that way, and there's no reason why we can't look at those and make them memorable and make them special.
Love it. Totally agree. It sounds like you're doing some really cool stuff up there. If you want to check out more from Jesse, the website that I was showing you, I will pull it back up for a second here, is experiencem2m.com. That's the number 2 and the letters M as in Mark. That's the name of my son, so I always go for M as in Mark. experiencem2m.com. Jesse, how else can people get a hold of you? And then we unfortunately got to run.
Jesse Otta on LinkedIn, or M2M Experience Consulting on LinkedIn as well. Email and this is the thing, Dan. I made a big mistake with we're working on something a little bit different, but the URL is terrible, as you know. It's difficult to tell people the email address, so it's just jesse@experiencem2m.com. But if you're able to populate that into anything after, I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I will do that right now. Jesse at experiencem2m.com. How about we throw that up on the board right there? Thank you, Jesse, so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Jesse Otta, self-described CX nerd and agency co-founder of M2M Experience Consulting. Thanks, man. Pleasure to have you as the first guest of 2022. Happy New Year, and best of luck and lots of success and health in 2022.
My pleasure, Dan. Thanks for having me, and I hope we started 2022 off very strong.
We did. We started off with a bang, so thank you. And thank you all for being here as usual. I did promise that link for bulk purchases of my book. If you are interested, just go to experiencemaker.bulkbooks.com. You can get up to 40% off of the cover price depending on what you order. This is a great company, Bulk Books. I love working with them. They make it so easy. Free shipping, definitely in the United States, might be a tad of shipping cost up to Canada, but free shipping throughout the US. So definitely check it out. All right, that's all for us. Actually, nope, there is one more thing for us that I need to point out, which is next week's guest is going to be Jose Palomino. He's the founder and CEO of Value Prop Interactive, also an author. He helps B2B companies with slow or stalled growth. And we're going to talk some customer experience with Jose next week. Thank you again so much for being here. Happy New Year to everybody. We'll see you next weekend, every week on the Experience Maker Live show. I'm Dan Gingiss, the Experience Maker. See you next Thursday. Take care.